Hello, Internet. Welcome to the Outplay podcast here, hosted by AYB Online on twitch.tv/AYBTV. I am one of the hosts, Johnny Esports. I host the Esports radio show, and this podcast I am joined, as always, by Globus from Lineage Esports. How's it going?
Pretty good. For whatever reason, you're tiny. Oh, there we go. Now you're back on full screen. Much better.
Okay. Awesome. Glad we're here, and glad we're to be talking about some LCS action. The semifinals is on its way. The quarterfinals just finished. I screwed that up. Let's try that again. The quarterfinals is finished, so we're going to talk about the quarterfinals and the kind of results there. Some upsets here and there that I think are pretty interesting, so I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about that. And then we'll preview the semifinals kind of coming up basically at the back half of the podcast, and then have a good time talking about League of Legends.
Yeah, I actually kind of felt like there was only really one upset. We had talked about in Europe how you had felt Fnatic was going to win against H2K,
Right.
and I had talked about how I felt like the implication of Daylor stepping down and everything involved with that, how that could potentially be, talking about larger issues in Fnatic's household. Like there could be a lot more going on there that we don't know about. And I said how I kind of weigh that heavily. Like I feel like home life in esports affects gameplay a lot more than people think. And you had said, well, no, it's still Fnatic. Well, obviously, Johnny was wrong.
Yeah,
H2K slapped them. HK
They like destroyed them.
There is the one, I think it was the first game was very close, and the rest just weren't. Like,
the third game.
No, it was the third game. That's what
Fnatic was coming back.
It was the third game.
Like Fnatic actually had a gold lead in the third game, but
then they became way too aggressive, and Febvin was constantly getting caught.
Then you blinked, and then H2K was winning the game. So
well, Fnatic also had like the most awkward drafts, and they kind of explained this. Actually, they were talking about how Reckless came out and said, thank you for support, whatever. And they talked about how their drafting plan after Daylor had left was a lot of like, if we take winning lanes, we should win. Like they felt like a lot of teams felt like this patch actually had a lot of implications for the meta, or the one that's going on to the LCS right now, because they're always a little bit behind, right?
Right.
And I it's funny because I don't feel like it did, but I don't know enough. Like normally I kind of look at things and kind of sometimes I say like, okay, this actually affects a lot. But these teams, they felt like a lot was going to change, and Fnatic felt like the change was, strong lane picks, and it didn't work out for them because they had like really awkward bans, really awkward picks. Like they left Hecarim and Shen open every game for HK to pick up, and they also left Vlad open. They never picked Vlad when it was open.
Yeah.
And H2K kind of just got to walk over them in picks and bans, and even by the third game, it was a winnable pick and ban, but it wasn't enough to be like a one-sided game. And Fnatic honestly could have won even any of those games, but they just looked kind of disheveled.
Yeah, a lot of what you're very, very used to seeing with Fnatic is a good, solid team play all around, and it's always matched by them having a lot of the best mechanical players in the game. But what you saw, what I thought I saw a lot of was like a lot of 1v1 opportunities would go to H2K's side every single time, or 2v2 if you're talking about the bot lane. So it's just like there was never a time where you can kind of see that team play that Fnatic has kind of built this reputation on for so long. No matter who's in the lineup, it could never show up because they were consistently behind, just like in every game. And again, like you said, even the one game that was close, well, they started that game behind. They were behind that entire game. They actually started to catch up, and it started to look like, okay, well, maybe this is the Fnatic that we expect. And then, no, it wasn't in the end, because even though the gold differential wasn't very different in that last game, they still just couldn't match what H2K was bringing.
Yeah, and that's just it. And I felt like, on top of that, Fnatic, it just felt like their shot calling was off, because Spirit never really had a proper grasp in the game. I actually loved Forgiven had tweeted out a picture, and it showed Nidalee, Fnatic Spirit as Nidalee in the bot lane brush, and it showed like a Winter Summoner's Rift, and it was like, "Dear Diary, he still hasn't left. We've been hunting tear down for 4 years now. I haven't been able to leave for CS." And it was the funniest thing to me, because that's honestly what it was. Is Spirit had no had no real like map pressure. He was just kind of
Yeah.
focusing bot, and
And the awkward thing is, sorry to cut you
go
off,
ahead.
but the awkward thing is with Spirit, he's been such a good like farm heavy jungler for a while, and he was spending all this time bot trying to like I don't know about make a gank, but he was just like spending all this time
And he wasn't doing anything with it.
doing nothing. Like and for a guy who's been so good about like I said, just being such a farm heavy jungler, he just wasn't playing his own style, which I don't know if that's a coaching thing. I don't know if that's like someone else shot calling that and not being right.
Right.
It was a really weird game at a Fnatic. Like I would have bought them losing. Like if you talked to me, we talked about it before the match here. You thought it was going to be H2K, and I was like, yeah, I can buy the arguments for H2K winning. But the fashion in which Fnatic lost wouldn't have been the way I would have saw it coming.
Yeah.
I thought it would be a close series in general. But B, I just like everyone wasn't playing to their strengths, and I don't know if maybe it's a meta thing, it's the patch thing. I don't know. Or they're just mentally, you lose that 2% because mentally they're not there, and that's enough for any team to be much better than you. So it's tough because it's hard for me to say like, oh my god, H2K is this god team, or was it Fnatic just playing really, really bad? It's one of those, like, it's one of the two. I don't know which one. Mm-hmm. I like the side with Fnatic was just really bad. Like they did not look like a LCS team that belonged in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree, and it was not something we expected. Like I didn't see them play that poorly, but I expected H2K to win just because I felt it was a close game. I thought it was less close than it was going to be, but I thought that H2K was going to win because again I feel like a lot of times you're talking about the fact that they're usually a mechanical team and you're wondering if it's a coaching thing, and that's how I kind of feel too because it's like I feel like the inner turmoils of a team. They play out a lot, so you see times like when something happens in the background, or something goes bad, and you hear later like, oh, because you learned the coach and this one player was fighting or something similar. And I'm also just because Daylor, after he had left, Febivin tweeted out that he was happy Daylor was gone, while Reckless tweeted out that he was a fan of Daylor, which is interesting to me because it's like it kind of sounds like that there was some give and take about it wasn't like the full team decided didn't like him.
Right,
which is interesting. Like I don't know enough there, but it was just it kind of says that maybe there was a split between the players on if they liked him or not. That being said, too, when the caster desk or the analyst desk at Riot was talking about this series, they had said immediately after the fact they're just like, yeah, this team that's the end of their season for the split, and they said, do you think that's a fair assumption because they have the gauntlet, like they're guaranteed a slot in the gauntlet,
right.
And so they still have a chance to go to Worlds. Mind you, this is also Yellow Star's. If Yellow Star doesn't make it, this will be the first Worlds he doesn't make it to.
Right.
Which would tie him with Dyrus, because Dyrus retired this year, unless they sub him in for a game just to have him.
Keep the streak alive.
But yeah, if they still have a chance to make Worlds. But the analyst does, I talk about, like, is you feel like this is it? And they kind of agreed that it was, and I have to agree with them, because if we assume based on the standings right now, and I kind of want to talk about this a bit because right now the final four teams in Europe are Splice versus H2K and G2 versus Unicorns. Now, based on that, one of those four teams is going to Worlds based on finishing first in the playoffs, right? Because the first spot goes to whoever wins the playoffs. Now, G2 is already guaranteed a slot at Worlds regardless because they have the most points regardless of how the games play out. So if G2 finishes, then I believe the next in line for points is probably going to be H2K, or it could actually be Unicorns. Actually, I don't know how many points Unicorns has. But
do you have that in front of you somewhere?
No, I should. Right?
Oh, you don't?
I
yeah.
can't, it's hard to find. They don't put it up on the website. You'd have to look.
Yeah, you think that would be easy?
I'd have to pull up the stream and find the point in the stream or in the primetime league.
Right.
But
like Reddit have it somewhere. Anyway, keep talking. Sorry.
But H2K is most likely to be the next in line for those most points, especially if they win against Splice. I believe because I believe somebody had said like H2K has to finish fourth, and Unicorns has to finish second to get the most points to Worlds or Splice. I believe. So that's unlikely. Like I don't see HK getting fourth. I can see them getting third easily. They could lose a Splice very easily, but I don't see them getting fourth. I feel like they're stronger than Unicorns, especially with Forgiven. But my point was that you have this gauntlet left, and Fnatic is guaranteed in the spot in the gauntlet, and they're guaranteed to finish like bottom tier of the gauntlet,
Right.
almost regardless. I believe there's only one situation they don't finish the last place in the gauntlet, and they're more likely going to face. I believe it'll be Unicorns, Splice. I'm assuming that G2 just wins the playoffs. It'll be Unicorns,
Right.
Splice, H2K, and Giants. It'll be 3 of those teams because one of those teams is going to qualify based on points. Or you include G2 in there, right? Because G2 is going to either qualify by points or by winning the playoffs. Oh, so no, yes, G2 won't be in there no matter what. Yeah, sorry, I'm wrong.
Yeah, because they're 1 or 2 either way.
So of those 4 teams, you have Unicorns, Giants, H2K, and Splice. One of those teams is going to qualify by points, and the other 3 are going to play off against Fnatic in the Gauntlet. Now, I think the only team they could beat is Giants. Like, I hate to incredibly lowball them, but I don't see them being like H2K. I see them being slaughtered by again. You know, maybe it's a closer series, but I see H2K still winning. Splice, I actually think is a farther series. Like I see Splice winning much more handedly, and Unicorns even to me is a 50-50.
Yeah.
So
at this point, just based on the kind of not even just this one series, but like the play in the past few weeks, I thought Fnatic was still just gonna pull it together and win against HK. They didn't. But like if you just take a pretty decent sample size of like this series and the past few weeks, Fnatic has been playing fairly poorly. I think this is just the team. There's no pulling it together at this point. Well, I guess there is. Everything's possible, but you know what I mean. Like it's just I don't have enough evidence at this point to believe that's gonna be there. And a lot of my pick on them winning was faith on the Fnatic name, which isn't a hugely great thing. Last week I kept talking about where I would put my money down. At this point, no, I would not put my money down on Fnatic to be able to pull that off and be able to come through. It just seems like I don't. The word overrated gets thrown around a lot in esports, but it just seems like that maybe like Reckless isn't as good in a non lane swap meta as we thought we might be. I thought it would be something that favored him, but like Forgiven, who hasn't been playing all season, basically dominated him. And Yellow Star, I think we're starting to see the end of just his career. Like it's super rough because I just think he's just been so good for so long that like it just might be the end of it, you know. And like Febivin just was not anywhere close to Ryu. I don't even think Ryu did anything super special. Because again, I just feel
they did funnel a lot of the gold to Rio. Actually, they did. Funnel a lot of the gold to Rio. I know. I agree. I kind of go back to these world's implications because I did look it up and here's some interesting tidbits for you. So right now, G2 is guaranteed has 90 points and is guaranteed a minimal of 40 more, which throws them into the auto qualify if they don't win the playoffs. In second place is Fnatic with 70 points. Like that is guaranteed. Like they have 70 points because they finished already. So they have a spot in the gauntlet guaranteed. Next is H2K with 30. And then Giants with 20 and Unicorns with 10. Now here's the interesting tidbit. Okay, so Giants is guaranteed a slot in the gauntlet as well. But Splice, who currently has 0 points because they didn't finish in playoffs last split. Splice, the only way for Splice to auto-qualify to Worlds is if Splice, aside from winning the playoffs, is if they win against H2K, finish second, and H2K finishes fourth. And then Splice would auto-qualify for Worlds, and then you'd have H2K be the top of the gauntlet, and then Unicorns directly underneath.
I really hope Splice makes it through. I just want to see it. I want to see what this team would do. I think I want to see this team gain the experience of being there. Like we were talking before the show. I think we were talking in the pre-show even that outside of G2, I don't see a realistic possibility of anyone finishing higher than G2, and I place them as like their potential to make it to semifinals.
In Europe.
In Europe, yeah. In Europe, and I don't see anyone else in the EU LCS doing better than them at Worlds. But this is kind of a situation where Splice is really interesting to me because there's this team of people that are virtually all together, and they're just learning as they go. And you were watching their growth, which is really cool. Like we don't get a lot of that in esports, or at least not a lot of that in League of Legends. Because even like on the NA side, on TSM, well, this was a team that sure they grew in a really fast period of time, but this was still a team that was essentially like they threw in a lot of all-stars, and it took them a split to get together, but it was one split of a bunch of all-stars to finally get together. Whereas Splice is this team of like people who, at this point last year, they're a garbage team. At this point this year, they're maybe the second best team in Europe, right?
Yeah.
So I want to see that curve and see where that goes. Like, do I think they'll eventually be a world contender? I can't say that, but like, I'm excited by their possibilities
It's also,
of what
it's
they
also
can
the
be.
Cinderella story, right? Like you just said,
Yeah, yeah.
they were bottom tier last split. You know, challenger to worlds to challenger, right? So
Yeah.
With Origin essentially. So you know, it's the same story. Like we want to see them go from this team that was, you know, and with only one roster change. Like that's what's interesting to me. Is like it's support of all roles, and this team that is a Cinderella story of bottom tier team to top two to you know just to go to Worlds, even if they don't do well, because I feel like it's also the beauty of Splice is that if they make it to Worlds, there's no real expectation.
No, yeah.
You know, maybe if they win playoffs, if they beat G2 in the finals, you know, and win through top seed, there might be some expectations. But if Splice wins through the gauntlet or through points contention, then I feel like there's no real expectations for them. Like they could just go out and win, and even if they lose at group stages, it's kind of like, well, at least we got to like
Matt,
we got to scrim against some of these great teams.
Yeah. Even if they win through EU and then they just get wrecked at Worlds, I still would be like, they had a great season. Clap. Whereas like G2, if they win and they get wrecked at Worlds, you were like, what's wrong with you, G2?
Did you
right?
take another vacation?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right. So I'm just super like I'm gonna make a regular sports comparison again. It's like Team Canada in volleyball, where they were the team that went to Olympics. That was just like happy to be there. That was the storyline. Like they made it to Olympics. That's great, and they end up making it to the quarterfinals, which is actually like a huge accomplishment for them. They finished 5th place. Blah blah blah. So like if that's kind of what I see Splice as right now. Is like, hey man, if this team qualifies for Worlds, they're gonna be the happy to be there team, but
right.
A happy to be their team that's good enough to play against a lot of teams and like watch them pull off an upset, watch them get put in a group that favors them. Who knows? Like, it could be very, very interesting.
So okay, so we're gonna finish the discussion in EU. We're gonna move over to NA in a second.
Yeah.
I wanna explain something to the viewers. So going into Worlds, there are 16 teams. Okay. Now because of MSI, G2 doing terrible at MSI, EU lost their top seed spot at Worlds. And they're now a second tier region at Worlds, according to Riot standards. So what that means is, so there's 4 groups of 4 of the 16 teams. There's 4 groups of 4, and each of those 4 groups has one top tier team, or like one seed 1 team, which is either a Korean team, a Chinese team, a North American team, or a Taiwanese team, or an LMS.
Right.
And then 2 teams from the middle pool of teams, the second seed, and then 1 team from the third pool, the last seed. So Europe now has 2 teams in the middle tier and 1 team in the bottom tier. So finishing first in Europe at playoffs and finishing first through points contention means you're both in the same pool. So there's no advantage of either or, aside from the money advantage of winning playoffs.
Right.
But finishing third, like the gauntlet, now means you're in the lowest pool. So knowing that, Johnny, who do you see winning playoffs? Let's skip ahead and we'll talk about the matches of Splice versus H2K, G2 Sports versus Unicorns. Who do you see making it to finals? Who do you see winning playoffs now that we're at a Final Four? And who do you want to see go through the gauntlet, as we've talked about?
Right. Okay. Well, at this point, this is a really boring prediction at this point.
That's how I feel. That's kind of why I clumped it all.
Yeah, I basically feel like G2 is going to win and Splice is going to finish second. I think the most interesting match is going to be Splice versus H2K coming up here in the semifinals, because H2K looked really good against Fnatic, but again, it's hard to tell if that was just Fnatic just being really, really garbage or if H2K is really good. But it is going to be very interesting to watch that Splice versus H2K game, but I do think Splice takes that. I really would be very surprised if Unicorns even touch G2. So yeah, G2 goes to the finals, and I think G2 just wins. I think G2 just like A to D, every player on that team is just much better than Splice, and coupled with them playing just good team play as well. There's no check mark I give Splice ahead of G2 anywhere, and I think Splice is really good. So that's how I see that kind of finishing. It does make the next thing interesting when it's H2K versus Unicorns. Because like you were saying, if H2K for the third place game, if they H2K don't win that,
if they win, they go to Worlds. If they lose, Splice goes to Worlds.
Yeah. So that one's. I've been underestimating unicorns for so long. That one I see is super tough. I would say H2K wins that one.
I agree.
Probably. And then so yeah, H2K ends up taking that takes that second spot, and then I just think Splice, through playing everyone else in that gauntlet, is just better than every other team left in the EU LCS from there, and then they win that. So that's really boring of me because I basically just said favorites the whole way. But the only thing I can see happening is maybe Unicorns beating H2K in that third place game. But other than that, I just think it's favorites going to be winning the whole way through EU.
I actually feel like H2K might beat Splice. And stay with me for a minute.
Yeah,
I think
I'm here.
I think Forgiven has actually created a drastic change in that team. And it's not just Forgiven like as a player, but I think it's just the mentality of the team. Because I feel like the way they played against Fnatic, as much as we say like Fnatic played terribly, and I feel like they did, I feel like Fnatic in that same shape that they are in now could have beaten it could have beaten Giants and potentially Unicorns, but I feel like H2K actually did show up. I feel like they played very well. I think H2K's rotations were very strong. I felt like their early game was very strong because their tower leads, they had a tower lead in every game at the start. Like they got the first tower, and I felt like Yankos was playing out of his mind.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, we glossed that over. Yankos played crazy good.
I constantly feel like, and maybe this is kind of biased because I play jungle, but I feel like a jungle kind of sets the tempo of the game, and having a good, like not just having a good jungler, but having a jungler who's playing well could like straight up win the game for you, just by getting your lanes ahead, right? Like
totally.
If you're playing an 8 out of 10, having a 10 out of 10 jungler on your team is gonna keep you above the bar, right?
Yeah, and Yankos for the longest time is always been considered maybe the best jungler in EU, but held back by even on terrible teams, but held back by his playoff performances, and for him to come up and really show up in this game against Fnatic, he's
so. With that said, I'm gonna call H2K beating Splice, because on the second part, and this is a big one, I feel like that Riot may need to consider, and I feel like it's weird that all of League of Legends has this format. I feel like playing through the quarterfinals is an advantage,
right?
Because I feel like a semifinalist team, they can scrim for an extra week, right? Like they don't. To be fair, they don't actually really lose scrim time, right? Like both teams get the same amount of scrim time, and for Splice and for G2 for that matter. They don't really get like an extra week of prep, like they really don't. Like H2K gets a kind of a disadvantage, and they have to prep specifically for their opponent in Fnatic. But they're still prepping, they're still playing. Splice is now prepping for a team they don't know who they're playing against yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they could be playing against H2K. They could be playing against Fnatic. They don't know until the moment that H2K knows. Really, like they know at the same time. So I feel like there's not really advantage, but I feel like that stage presence and like that 1 week gap that Splice had of not being able to play, I think is a disadvantage for them. And I also think Splice has never played in the playoffs yet. This is their first playoffs, and I think that plays hugely into the mentality of the team. And I feel like that might be an issue. So I don't know that they could show up. Like, I do agree they're a great team, but I don't think that, I don't think that they're going to be able to win. Oh, no, the cam is working fine.
It's working now.
Yeah.
It was just not working a second ago.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Anyway, continuing.
Yeah, sorry, no, now it's messed with my video, so I gotta... There we go.
Technical difficulties.
No, now it's frozen again.
You with my hands.
No, but because it's Splice's first playoffs, I do feel like it's gonna be, one of those things. It's like they might just like not show up just because they're not used to it. And so for that reason, I give it to H2K, and I feel like H2K again has shown up, and I feel like Forgiven being on the team is kind of a huge advantage. That being said, I do see Unicorns losing to... Like, I agree with you. G2 is going to win. There's no question about it. Like, I would be incredibly surprised if they lose to Unicorns.
Oh, yeah. That would be the upset of the season.
And so if G2 wins, and then we have Unicorns versus the loser of Splice versus HK, which I think is Splice. I think Splice wins. I think either team beats the Unicorns. I think Unicorns is a great team, and I think they've proven that they are a fourth-place team.
Mhm.
I just don't see them beating either or. And so
Right.
I kind of see H2K if they beat Splice. If I might be wrong with this, and don't quote me on it, but I believe if H2K beats Splice, they auto qualify for Worlds, because if they beat Splice, then they're either guaranteed by beating G2, or if they lose to G2, I believe they become the next team with the most points. Because if they, let me double check this just to prove it. So if H2K gets second, they will have 120 points, which will be the highest amount of points available. So they will auto qualify for Worlds if they beat Splice. So I feel like HK is gonna beat Splice and qualify by points or playoffs. I think points. I don't think it matters because G2 and HK would then be the top two teams, the same seeding. And I agree with you. I think Splice is gonna beat anybody in the gauntlet. I mean, there's a potential upset through maybe Unicorns or if Giants shows up. But I think it's Splice, and I agree with your thought process that European teams going to Worlds, according to both of us, will be H2K and G2 for the top seed, and Splice for the third seed.
It's actually just kind of interesting in a way how, just because of the way the points and all that works out, is that like even though we have totally different paths,
it's the
like
same teams. It's the same teams.
Same teams in the same order. It's interesting.
Interesting tidbit: G2 could lose to Unicorns and would still finish in the same positions we're talking about.
Yeah,
because they would still finish by most points. So, which is really interesting. So we're gonna move over to NA because now we've talked enough about Europe and what the bracket is for that. So in NA, we have Immortals versus Cloud9 this Saturday, and then on Sunday we have TSM versus CLG. And we'll do you want to talk about the quarterfinals? Yeah, I completely forgot about that. Yeah. You're right. So Cloud9 versus Envy, and then CLG versus Liquid.
Not much to say about Cloud9 and Envy, really.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because I wasn't watching that right away because we had talked about, and I said it's going to be a stomp by Cloud9 3-0. Like, there's no question about it.
I think it's 1, which is what it ended up being, so...
It's funny because, like I said, I wasn't watching, and then I went away for a bit, came back, and Cloud9 loses the first game to Envy. And it was a very close game, like, very high kill on both sides, and I was like, maybe we have a series. Like, maybe this is going to happen. And then the second game I missed... And I saw Cloud9 won, and I watched the results. I'm like, oh, okay. And I kind of rewinded back on the stream and saw, like, okay, it was a kind of a heavy-handed win. But that doesn't mean you think, it's second game. Now we're getting the third and fourth game. Things are going well. Cloud9 just slapped them. Like, there was no, like... It was bad.
Bam.
And I was watching, and I felt like, okay, I was right. Envy just had, like, a flash in the pan of, like...
Yeah,
we can do something, and then they realize they can't do something.
They can't do anything. Well, again, this gives me a lot of information on Cloud9. Actually, I was saying before, like in best of threes, where sometimes I'm more impressed by a 2-1 than I am by a 2-0. Because if Cloud9 just won this 3-0, we would just be like, Team Envy's garbage. End of story.
Right.
Whereas like Team Envy wins that first game, and it shows me that Cloud9 know how strong they are and have the mental fortitude to just come back and smash them right away, and then go 3-0 from there. Basically, that actually gives me more information that Cloud9 actually legitimately is a really good team, and Envy is garbage.
and I have to add to that, like Cloud9's team that has, again, and this is Envy's first playoffs. It's for Cloud9. So good on you, Envy, for making it as far as you did. It's your first playoffs. Good for you.
Wish Apex was there still.
Right. But I mean, Cloud9 again. I got to give that talent to as well. They were leaps and bounds ahead, and I want to actually add a tidbit that I noticed here, and it was the same for the CLG versus Liquid game. I'm super interested that the bot lane meta, the Tom Kench pick priority that's been going on. Both games had a lot of Tom Kench going on, which is really interesting to me. Like I can't entirely justify it. I think it has to do with that in NA the meta relies a lot on Ashe or Jhin AD carry.
Right.
Like that's kind of just like the big thing right now. And I think that the idea was that you can play either way, and Tom Kench is a viable counter because in the Jhin and Tom Kench combo, the beauty is that the way that their CC works, you can chain it very well. Like if you get an auto and a Jhin stun, then you can proc up the Tom Kench stun, as well as you also got rid of Jin's innate weakness, which is he has no mobility, and now you have Tom Kench to save him.
Whereas that moves for him.
Right. And whereas the other side is that you can also play it against Ashe, or also with Ashe, because with Ashe also doesn't have any mobility. But the added bonus is that if you get Ashe ulted, Tom Kench can save you, which is really interesting to me. Like it's something that I always love when there's no real like stats change to characters, but they suddenly become meta.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious if we're going to see that in the semifinals. I kind of hope so. I think it'll be interesting. But that was the most I took out of that matchup was actually
Yeah, well,
the meta.
and a small tidbit. Part of that is why I wish there was almost a competitive patch and a regular patch. I know some people might not like that very much, but where a competitive patch stays on for longer, just so you can see a meta evolve. Because sometimes I feel like we get a new patch. Yeah, well, sometimes I feel like we get a new patch, and then I'm like, oh, I still feel like they were like learning and figuring out how things worked in the last patch, and then you're changing it already. So yeah, I kind of wish they just kind of like kept patches for longer for that reason. Because yeah, like you said, nothing really changed about Tom Kench for him to suddenly become meta, but people are just realizing, hey, wait a minute, this can counter this, and this can do this. And I like that. That's like one of my favorite parts of League of Legends in general. And it kind of gets taken away a little bit when it's like, oh well, yeah, we're just gonna patch lane swaps aren't a thing anymore. Like as much as I do prefer 2v2 lanes because it is better to watch, frankly. But yeah, it's just just a small tidbit.
So talk to me, Johnny. How did you feel about CLG versus Team Liquid?
I think they went off script because Team Liquid was supposed to finish 4th. So I think CLG is here, and they're like, I think this patch is good for them. I think they're finally ready to go. Like they started off the season so poorly, and now they're like, but we're a team that can contend with TSM, can contend with Immortals, and we're gonna prove it by destroying Liquid. And it kind of felt that way. Liquid was able to keep one game close, I believe. They won that 3rd game.
With
but
Jin.
it was
with
Jinth exactly coming out of nowhere. But what I think CLG does the best out of any team, whether I'm watching Korea even or I'm watching NA, EU, whatever, is that they recognize so well their power spikes better than I think any team in the world, to be honest.
Right.
Whereas they could be behind in a game, and you know how like a lot of teams, when they're behind in the game at the highest level, they'll go, well, we got to make a move now, or we're just going to slowly bleed and then lose the game eventually anyway, so let's just try to make a move now, high risk, we'll see if it works. If we win, we win. If we don't, well, we were going to lose the game anyway. CLG doesn't feel that way about the game. They go, we can't take this fight. I know we're behind and we need to catch up, but we know we can't take this fight. We'll take the next one. And they just wait till the perfect opportunity every time to come at you. And while like individually some of the players aren't as strong as maybe some of the competition in NA, and while even like their whole their rotations aren't as clean as we've seen in the past, even recently, but they're just their shot calling is what it comes down to. Aframu is getting to that point where it's always been high as the best shot caller in NA in his legend status, and it's getting to that point where I think Aframu might be better than him, or is at least right beside him.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair, and I can agree with that. I think that a lot of it comes to, ironically, from both teams that they've had very good junglers. I've talked about this before about how the tempo I think is built by a jungler, and Aframu has Xmithy, who I think has played phenomenally this season and this split. And I actually feel like Dardoch very like underplayed this series. Like there was really only one game I felt like he did well, and it was their win.
I feel like in general, Dardoch is now getting exposed for his over-aggression, and I think people, like, when he was first the rookie in the scene, it was like, oh, he's doing all these crazy things, but I think people just have the tape on him now. I think they just kind of know.
I can't
I think the top teams know how to play against him.
I can't tell what it is. Like, I'm trying to, like, because to me, it's like, and it might just be, like, something with him, because I feel like over-aggressive junglers isn't something new to NA. Like, this wasn't a guy who came in and had a new style. This was just a guy who played it very well. Yeah. And it was like, not that the teams didn't know how to answer to him, but it was interesting to me about Dardoch was that he was almost his own threat. Like, a lot of junglers, aside from maybe, like, Rush and Meteos and Rainover, have mostly that they're like, even Sven, I would say, is not his own threat. Sven's threat is he's an aggressive jungler, but that gets his lanes ahead. Dardoch was kind of his own threat on the team. Like, you actually had to be careful of Dardoch. But in a lot of these games, you saw Dardoch just, like, awkwardly taking 2v1 fights that he shouldn't have, and then just dying, and it was like, okay, what's going on here? And there was one flash in the pan win by Liquid, and they won pretty handedly, mind you. And I actually, that's the one game I missed. So I didn't see it, but
well, that game was actually like, that game was he played 4 games. Dark was super aggressive in all 4 games, and at 25% of the time you'll succeed, and that's what happened. Like Dardoch went off that game. He helped Jinth become a very strong Ashe there, and it was like, okay, yeah, like it's just not a high percentage game, you know. Like you're gonna win games like that sometimes, but you're not gonna win series like that. Is the problem?
Right. Yeah. No, I can agree with that. I felt like the two things to take away from this series. I felt like I don't feel like there's much to take away from gameplay. The two things I will take away is one, CLG played like they did MSI. Even like not even just mechanically, but almost strategically the way they played. Even down to the Aurelion Sol pick. And interesting tip, like Zion Spartan only played Gnar 4 times. All 4 times. And it was funny to me because it's like they almost forced him on it because it was like, well, it's really a safe lane, and then CLG played to the bot lane of the map. Like,
he wasn't afraid of Lorlo's Aurelia, even though like Lorlo's like that's his champ.
Right.
And I really feel like that was one of those. Let's not show the rest of the LCS what we have. Just keep playing Gnar, so no one knows what else we have.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I felt, and it was really funny because every game, I only saw this because Riot has that special stream matchup. For this matchup, it was the top lane. It was Lolo versus Zion Spartan, and it was really interesting to me. They had Dyrus had brought up every game he had a different skin on Gnar. He played a different skin for all 4 games.
I didn't notice that.
And he said it's because Zion Spartan, he's like, you can't make me play a different champion, but I'll at least feel like I am. I thought it was really funny. But and the other thing I'll take away from it is as much as they're playing like MSI, but I also thought it was really interesting from Team Liquid's side that this one series effectively killed Fabi's career. Like, he was benched after this series, and Jinth is going to be playing for the rest of their matches. Like because they're going to be in the gauntlet, and Jinth is playing for them, and that's really interesting to me because one, Jinth is not Jinth is not like a seasoned vet. Jinth is not somebody
straight up didn't know who Jinth was the second they said someone was playing.
I didn't either.
Like I had no information.
Did you hear that apparently they had said on stream that the Riot officials didn't realize Jinth was a substitute, and they had to pull out the paperwork to prove that they had registered him as a substitute at some point in the past because they didn't know. Like a lot of times, like teams have a lot of subs that they don't ever really plan to use. Like Origin has like Expeke who they actually use, and some teams have subs that are more like if Bjergsen suddenly breaks his arm.
Yeah, Reggie
can step in because something emergency happens, but they will never like substitute him for gameplay. And I guess Liquid had Jinth as their substitute at some point, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, we're bringing Jinth in for the 3rd game, and the Riot officials were like, who? Like, is he here? Like, who is this guy?
They're probably like, we're gonna sub in for Fabi, and they're like, you can't bring Piglet in, and like, no, we have a sub.
Yeah,
we actually have a sub.
They're like, we're swapping out AD carry, and it's like, is it Piglet? Like, you can't. He's in the Challenger series. Like, no. We have an actual substitute, which is really interesting to me. But I mean, it worked out. I don't know if it's gonna work out long term. Reddit was quick to be like, oh, Fabi, you're garbage. And Fabi, I never thought was a top tier AD carry. He's always been a serviceable AD carry. But it's like, I don't know if Jinth is enough of a real, I don't know how to put it, but like he's a real mechanical advantage. And Jinth, after looking at his history, he's a 2-trick pony. Like, he plays Ashe and Jhin, and that's it. Like, it's super meta right now, but it's like...
For the meta, I guess,
but it's like, if you get banned, and one of those is going to get picked because they're very meta. So if you ban Ashe, take Jhin, and now you've destroyed his champion pool.
Is his name Jinth like a fusion of Ashe's and Jin's name together just for that? I don't know.
That's not. How do you get the fusion there?
I don't know.
Jhin and the
Yeah.
There's no th in Ashe.
Never mind. But Ashe ends with H-E. I don't know.
Nice try, Johnny. But yeah, so that's something I can take away from it. Another tidbit, actually, I kind of forgot. We're talking about the Tom Kench pick. It's really interesting that a lot of N8 teams played Syndra. Like it just kind of became a pick. Like, it was banned against CLG a bunch, and I believe it was played once in the C9 versus NB game, and it was banned from then on out. What's really interesting to me is that if Syndra's getting played, Bjergsen's a Syndra, was a Syndra 1 trick.
Yeah, was a Syndra god for a while, yeah.
So, I'm super curious if that's going to happen. So yeah, that's all I can say for the quarterfinals. I have nothing else to say because I feel like there wasn't much to say gameplay wise. I feel like there was no question of the winners. Like Team Liquid upsetting CLG was a plausibility, but it wasn't really going to happen. And aside from the drop game for both teams, there's really nothing there that really to me stands out.
Oh yeah.
So going into the semifinals, we have Immortals versus Cloud9 and TSM versus CLG. And to me, this is really interesting because I feel like these are the 4 teams that can make Worlds. Like, yeah. And I know it's almost happening in the other regions, but like I don't see another team in NA making Worlds. Like I genuinely cannot see Team Liquid upsetting Cloud9 or CLG. Immortals or TSM, I believe, are guaranteed basically based on the points advantage.
Yeah.
So 3 of these 4 teams to me are going to Worlds, and as they sit, CLG has the highest points. With 90, and then TSM at 70. Immortals is at 50. Team Liquid's currently at 50 only because they've already gotten their 20 points from this split. And Cloud9 is at 10. So Cloud9, as far as I believe, there is no iteration where Cloud9 qualifies through having the most points.
Yeah.
So Cloud9 has to qualify by either winning playoffs or by winning the gauntlet, which they've done before, mind you.
Yeah.
But the thing is there's greater stuff on the line for NA because in Europe we talked about how the first seed and second seed are in the second pool no matter what, and that the third seed is in the last pool. I can't think right now. In Worlds for NA, the first seed, which is the one who wins playoffs, will actually be put in the first pool, the first seeds at Worlds. The second one will be put into the second pool, and the third one will be put into the last pool, I believe. Or no, wildcard, EU, and... Let me think. It's wildcard, EU, and no, it's not NA. I believe it's Korea, I think. I'm trying to look at this. Yeah, it actually is Korea.
It's the meme.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah. Okay, hold on. I'm actually realizing this as we're talking. I believe a Korean team is gonna be in the third pool at Worlds. Let me pull this up. I'm super interested. As I'm pulling this up, I'm gonna take a second and pull this up because I think I just kind of found something super interesting. Tell me what your thoughts are going for Immortals versus Cloud9 and TSM versus CLG.
Okay. I think Cloud9 is a super strong team here, but I just don't see a realistic situation where Immortals don't win. It's basically I'm actually just gonna basically reiterate what I said last week's show because we predicted these teams to come here and these teams have won in the fashion that I thought they were gonna win. So no new information has been gained from watching the quarterfinals. They just did what I expected them to do. So really, I just think Immortals is gonna be Cloud9. It'll be a very good series. It could go 3-2, but I think Immortals is gonna take it unless they do something stupid like do Lucian top again or whatever. TSM versus CLG. I actually think CLG has a better chance of beating TSM than Cloud9 has a chance of beating Immortals because CLG has shown this is the team that has beaten SKT. Sure, that was one game. This is a team that has played so strong in MSI. They won the last split. If I wasn't already a TSM, if I was teamless and I had no fandom anywhere, I would have became a CLG fan. This year alone because CLG has been just so impressive. I still think TSM better than them and TSM wins, but CLG, this might come down to one team fight in a game 5 again. So I just think TSM just ends up winning if I'm going to put my money down, but I'm just super impressed by the CLG team. And then CLG and Cloud9 clash against each other, and I just based on everything I've just talked about, I still think CLG wins that one. And that would give CLG enough to be second in points, I believe, at that point, if I'm correct. But other than that, then you have TSM and Immortals facing off at in the final, which I'm going to be there. I'm going to be super hyped about. I think TSM is NA's hope to win Worlds, or at least make it to the finals. So
I think Immortals is just most chance, honestly. But
Yeah, like the Immortals are real good, and I think where the one thing that potentially holds back Immortals is their bot lane, and not that they're bad, but I just think Adrian's pool is really small, and I think Wild Turtle's pretty darn good, but I don't know if he's world class. Mind you, I don't really even know if Double Lift is world class at this point, but like I believe he is. Double Lift was maybe the best AD carry in L of NA this season, and I have a lot of respect for Wild Turtle, but I think one thing that, like, if I were to make a pro con list, Immortals is maybe a tiniest weakness is like Adrian's pool in that bot lane, and the fact that Wild Turtles is always kind of like comes off as bad is that cleanup AD carry as opposed to like that carry AD carry, and that's not really a bad thing in a lot of ways when your team like Immortals is so strong. But I just don't think you say the same thing about the bot lane of TSM with Biofrost and Double Lift. I think they're not just a cleanup bot lane; they are a bot lane that's out there to dominate you. So I give TSM the win over Immortals on that. And it's still, I think, even the slimmest margins, even though it might sound like I'm saying TSM is infinitely better than them, I still think it's a slim margin that TSM wins over Immortals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I figured out the answer.
All right.
Sorry.
I stalled for long enough.
Yeah, no, I was super interested because they explained when they first explained how the regions would look. They explained that the top 4 teams in MSI guaranteed a spot in the first pool, and that if you lost out of your pool, they would rearrange the groups. And so I was looking at it, and I was like, well, Korea actually finished 4th in the group stages, which is super interesting, like super bad for them in MSI. So I was like, does that mean Korea actually has a team in the bottom pool? And I looked, and actually the way it worked out was, so the first pool was the top four regions, which is LMS, NA, Korea, and China. And then the second pool was one team from the fifth place team in MSI, which was Europe, and then the remaining teams, and then the bottom tier was guaranteed, unless International Wildcard won, then it was going to be the 2 wildcard teams, 1 North American team, 1 Europe team. So what that basically means is, like I was saying, that the playoff implications for NA are actually more important than EU, because they have one team that's going to be in the top seed, one in the middle seed, and one in the bottom seed. Whereas in Europe, the 2 finish in the same seed, and then the gauntlet winner finishes the last seed. So I'll be completely honest, I did not pay attention to what you were saying because I was trying to find this answer. But I believe you said Immortals and TSM in the finals.
Yeah.
And you put TSM ahead. I would agree. And then I'm curious, who do you feel between CLG and Cloud9 would win?
I did say CLG wins that, and that gives. And I was saying I believe that gives CLG enough points at that point to be the second team, if I'm correct at that point, because they had finished last.
I could tell you in a second. So if they finish third, 90 plus 70 is 160. Immortals would finish. You're right. If CLG finishes, CLG has to finish 4th for Immortals to win by points.
Right. So I think CLG finished that, and then I think Immortals rolls their way through the whatever gauntlet or whatever. Even though Cloud9 it could very well play with them, compete with them there, but I think Immortals would take that 3rd spot because of that.
So here's an interesting tidbit for you. So I will agree. I see Immortals and TSM winning, and I see TSM winning the whole thing. I actually feel like Cloud9 versus Immortals is very close. I think all these are close. I think CLG versus TSM has a larger gap for TSM. I feel like Immortals versus Cloud9 is very close. I
was the opposite on that. I know you weren't paying attention, so I'm just going to reiterate it. I actually thought CLG is going to be really close to TSM just because of how they play best of 5s, and I mentioned they're the team that beat SKT. They're the team that has won the split. They're the team that shows up in the playoffs and right now, and I think CLG is going to put a really big fight against TSM and Cloud9. Cloud9 has a wild card. All these 4 teams, Cloud9 is the one team that has dropped some games that you're like really questioning. Well, like CLG was at the beginning of the season, but I just mean like even in just like recent history, like the past 4 weeks or so, Cloud9 has been dropping some games to teams they shouldn't be dropping to, and all that kind of jazz. So I think fair. Cloud9 has more exposable weaknesses than any of the other 4 teams here.
That's fair. I could see that. I still, I don't know. I put Cloud9 closer. I think CLG is a lesser team than the 2. The thing to me is, like, I've never felt like, in NA at least, I've never gone to Worlds and be like, there are 4 teams that deserve to go to Worlds. Like,
but they're trolling this time.
Like, ever. Like, and I feel like there is now. Even Europe, I don't feel like there's 4 teams. Like, I feel like it's HK, Splice, and G2. Like, regardless of order, I feel like it's those 3. I don't feel like Unicorns and Giants even deserve to go. Fnatic, I feel like, is kind of garbage right now. So that's what I feel like. And in NA, I would have said the same most splits, except for this split, where I feel like there's 4 teams. So I see TSM winning the whole thing regardless. So their points are kind of nulled out, because, I mean, I believe TSM... If TSM wins the next game, they're guaranteed at Worlds, because they would have 70 plus 90. Yeah. So unless they... Oh, wait, no, this is interesting. So if TSM and Immortals win, or it doesn't matter, TSM or Cloud9 win, TSM anyone wins. Let me see this. So, okay, so if TSM finishes second, right? If they finish second, they get 90 points to add to their 70, which would be 160. If CLG finishes third, they get 70 points to their 90, which puts them at a tie with TSM. So if TSM finishes second and CLG finishes third, regardless of where Immortals and Cloud9 finish, then they have a tiebreaker for that. For the points, the auto-qualified points. And I don't know if there's a tiebreaker, or if it goes on, like, finishing, like, how you finished in the current season.
Right.
Or, like, how they do it. But there'd be a tie.
That's interesting.
But there'd be a tie, which is really interesting. Like, I don't know how that works out, but I think that's cool. So with that said, if CLG finishes third or better, they are guaranteed to go to Worlds, unless TSM finishes second. That's the only other option. Like, if CLG finishes third or better, and TSM finishes second, that's the only time that CLG doesn't auto-qualify by points. If CLG finishes fourth, then it's kind of an open ballpark, and it gets interesting. So, I feel like CLG has a good shot at going to Worlds. Like, I feel like CLG against Cloud9 is a very, 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 very close game. I think it's a complete 50-50. I give it to Cloud9, personally, but I feel like it's a complete 50-50. So, with that being said, CLG is very close going to Worlds. We can assume TSM is going to go by winning the playoffs. I'd prefer to see... And this is going to get really, for a minute. I want TSM to finish top seed. Because by finishing top seed, this is where things get interesting, because the way the group stages work with Korea, this is my thing. I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the best iteration for TSM to avoid SKT and Rock in the group stages. Because if they get first, if TSM finishes first, they're guaranteed to avoid Rocks. Unless KT suddenly upsets Rocks, which is not going to happen. But then they avoid Rocks, because Rocks has finished top seed as well. And then SKT is going to be somewhere in the second seed, more than likely. So it doesn't really matter. They have a chance of...
There's going to be some crazy group of death.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Because of how poorly SKT's been doing, how up and down their split has been. But we just know they're so good, there's going to be some crazy group of death that's going to be like, as if TSM drew this group. Or, it's going to be something dumb, right?
It's going to be who's the best team in China right now? It's Royal, right? So it's going to be Royal, SKT, the second team, Immortals and Splice. And then we're going to be like, oh, Splice. At least he got to Worlds. But honestly, no. So I feel like CLG is going to Worlds because they have to win they have to beat one of these teams to go to Worlds. Like, I don't see them beating TSM. You're saying it's kind of close, and you're saying closer, but TSM still slaps.
Yeah.
And I agree. And that TSM's gonna slap them. But CLG then just has to beat either Cloud9 or Cloud9 or Immortals, and I feel like it's gonna be Cloud9. I feel like that's a very close game. And I kind of like that it's going to be that way, because I feel like TSM and Immortals are the best 2 teams in NA. There's no questions about it. And I feel like they're the best chances at Worlds for NA. Now, that third slot, I can't really make an argument for either or. I really can't. And the reason is, before you'd be like, well, you kind of have to choose. You're supposed to be an analyst, blah, blah, blah. Here's what I'll say. Cloud9 has... some of their roster has been to Worlds before. I mean, they have a former world champion in Impact. Some of their roster has been to Worlds before, and they haven't been to... But they were at the last Worlds, and they did well in group stages. Like, both teams did equally as well in the last group stages, where neither made it out.
Right.
But they both did equally as well the group stage, so I can't really be like, oh, well, past experience says blah, blah, blah. And right now, I can't really give favoritism over either or, because CLG had a really slumping half of the season and then really showed up. CLG has been fairly consistent for most of the season, except for like the odd game, like you've talked about, which is true. They've had some very odd losses here and there. But I can't really give like which one is better for us as a region at Worlds, because I feel like CLG mechanically is lower than Cloud9, but I also feel like their cohesion is much higher. And going into Worlds, there could be a meta change that really affects either team. Like as we've seen in previous Worlds, a lot of times there's a large patch change going into it that really affects.
And it comes down to who's the best Corki.
Who's the best Corki? You're not wrong. Every year, so
Corki got played in EU. It's starting. It's happening.
EU's gonna win Worlds.
They're practicing for it.
But that's just it. Like I can't tell. Like we might walk in and say like, oh, it's gonna be great, and then suddenly it becomes an 80 carry meta, and it's like, Stixxay can't show up. You know what I mean? Or a mid lane meta with Huhi, even worse. Or maybe it becomes a top lane meta, and then it's like, oh, I wish we had Zion Spartan at Worlds, and I really don't know. Like I really don't.
Yeah.
I don't have some insider knowledge, so I feel like that matchup of CLG versus Cloud9 is probably the fairest way, because if CLG wins, they are guaranteed to go to Worlds, and then Cloud9 has to beat Immortals in the Gauntlet. If CLG loses, then Immortals goes to Worlds, and then Cloud9 has to face CLG again in the Gauntlet. And so Cloud9 has the harder route to Worlds.
Yeah, they have to CLG twice essentially, and like at some
Yeah, so they have the harder route to Worlds. And I feel like it's almost better that way, because I feel like Immortals has I want Immortals to be in the middle pack, because I don't want them to be put with SKT either. And they still could, mind you, but there's less chance if they do. And so I'm kind of hopeful for that. So I'm going to call it real quick, because we've been kind of rambling about like the potentialities of it all. I would like to see as something falls in my basement.
Yeah.
TSM win the whole thing, Worlds as well, but to win the whole NA playoffs. I don't see it not happening. I'd be really surprised if it doesn't. And so they would get the first seed to Worlds. Second seed, because of the way it works out, I actually might be wrong. There might not be a situation where for Immortals to 50 and 90. So the only way for Immortals to win by highest points is if Immortals finishes second and CLG finishes fourth. I would like to see Immortals get the second seed at Worlds, because I feel like they're more deserving than CLG or Cloud9. Because, and I feel like if they can, because the irony is that they don't really have a choice, because if they lose the TSM, then they have to hope that CLG loses. That's it. They just have to hope CLG loses to Cloud9 for them to go to Worlds, which they can't really like help, which is interesting. So I hope they get the second seed, and then third seed. I'm just gonna say it. I hope for Cloud9. I hope for Cloud9. I think Cloud9's the better team right now, and we'll kind of find out next week, assuming that they both lose, unless there's a sudden upset, which then that team definitely deserves to go. But yeah, I would love to see if the three teams going to Worlds be TSM, Immortals, and Cloud9.
All right.
How do you feel, Johnny? How do you feel for the three teams?
Well, I said earlier, but again, maybe that was when you weren't paying attention. But I got TSM, Immortals, but I have CLG making that third spot. Like you said, like Cloud9 has the better individual players, but I just think CLG's has got that teamwork that just sets them up that much more. I don't think they're a Worlds contender or anything. I actually think Cloud9 might even have a better time at Worlds than CLG would. But I just think right now where the meta currently fun. More fun. But I just think where everything sits in this meta right now, where they're going to be playing in these games right now, CLG is going to be able to do it. I think they got the right stuff, and they'll be there. They'll sit in that third spot and be happy.
I'll give you a real quick overview, just a 2-minute overview of the other regions. So in Korea right now, the finals is going to be Rocks Tigers versus KT Rolster. SKT were surprisingly upset by KT Rolster. Interesting tidbit: if KT Rolster also upsets Rocks, which is very unlikely. Incredibly unlikely. If that happens, I will eat a shoe. That is not a contract. I'm joking. But if KT Rolster beats Rocks, SKT then does not auto qualify for Worlds, and they would have to win through the Gauntlet.
Oh wow.
So there is a chance that SKT doesn't make it to Worlds. Because if Rox loses, KT rolls through auto qualifies.
Can you imagine?
Then Rox auto qualifies by points, and then SKT has to go through the gauntlet, and they would have the first seed in the gauntlet, like the top seed in the gauntlet, but they could still lose.
And then a Freak of Freaks or something goes.
And let's just say no, Freak of Freaks does have a shot.
Yeah.
And to also add to that, remember this is an odd year for SKT, and it's also no world champion has ever made it to the world championship the following year to defend their title. So if the scripts are right, SKT won't make it to Worlds. In the LMS, it is J Team in first place, who have taken over the former roster of TPA, including their points, with AHQ and Flash Wolves playing this weekend to make it the finals. I believe that it's a very, 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 very close game. J Team is the favorites to win it all and to get that auto qualify. And the points, it actually looks like it'll be a tiebreaker between AHQ and Flash Wolves, unless Flash Wolves wins this weekend. If they win against HQ, I believe Flash Wolves and J Team are guaranteed to go to Worlds. And if they lose, then it actually becomes a very, very interesting points where they both tie and there might be a tiebreaker. In China, we have Royal has already guaranteed a spot at Worlds. EDG has already guaranteed a spot at Worlds. And so now it's just the gauntlet, and there's just I can't say anything. It completely depends on how things play out. But both their top teams have guaranteed a spot at Worlds, and they've already auto qualified. So with that being right now, essentially that means the 4 teams guaranteed at Worlds are RNG, EDG, Rocks Tigers, and G2, and a lot of the others are up in the air. But we've kind of made assumptions. So
cool.
And wildcard is wildcard. So
yeah. All right. Well, thanks for everyone who tuned in this week to the Outplay podcast. We'll be back next week, next Wednesday, to do the show. And then I'm actually going to be in Toronto for the NA final, so I'm excited to be going out to that. I don't know, report from there or something. Other than that, if you missed any part of the show, this show will be on aybonline.com tomorrow at some point. I just got to figure out when to upload it. And you can watch that. You can share it with your friends. Make sure everyone watches it before the semifinals happens. Then you can see if we're right or if we're garbage. Which most of the time we end up being garbage. But we were...
Spoiler alert, we're garbage either way.
Spoiler alert, we're garbage anyway, especially if you watch the pre-show stream before this. But thanks for everybody for watching. Do check out the Resports radio show that will be happening next week. I'm sure I'm going to cover a little bit of this and whatever other esports stuff that's going on. That happens Sunday evening. There will be a live recording on facebook.com/Resports radio show. And then on Monday on aybonline.com, the podcast will be available for that as well. And check out shirts and stuff that you can buy from Resports. All the information's on the Facebook page at Resports, on Twitter as well.
All right, well, thank you internet for watching, and we will see you next week. And Johnny's gonna go buy me an Echo Fox t-shirt in Toronto.
Yeah. I'm thinking of buying a sweater. I think I'm gonna buy a sweater when I'm there. They usually have the hoodies and stuff.
All right.
Anyway,
Goodbye, internet.
goodbye, everybody.